Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Culture War podcast. I'm your host, Tim Poole. We have breaking news as we start the show. A press conference just concluded. The governor of Utah, as well as the FBI and the sheriff, they have stated the man who killed Charlie Kirk has been captured. They explained in detail the engravings on the bullet casings, which, based on the how this individual was turned in, that is, he was turned in by a family member. They explained that the family members personally had a conversation with the suspect, stating that Charlie Kirk had spread hate speech or hateful rhetoric. The bullet casings expressed furry memes, furry culture memes, it appears, as well as anti-fascist ideology, notably saying, "Hey, fascist, catch," as well as "Hey, Bella Ciao," which is a song that was sung by Italian resistance fighting Nazis and fascists. So it seems to be that this is, at least for now, based on the assessment by law enforcement, a left-aligned individual who assassinated Charlie Kirk. He has been captured. There will be breaking news that is still coming out throughout the day, so we'll be tracking that. Normally, we just kind of have the general conversation. But we will be discussing for this show the underlying cause of the mental illness in this country, illness in general, what's plaguing us, but the political violence. And considering the response we've seen from the corporate press, as well as many prominent left-aligned and liberal individuals, which are either claiming both sidesism, glorifying the death of Charlie Kirk. I'm certainly, I have a lot of strong statements to make. And I'll start simply by saying, because it's personal and I want to say it, the amount of security that I have and other personalities in a similar space is incomparable to the amount of freedom and lack of security that our counterparts on the left have. That is, we spend millions. We have security perimeters, active armed guards. We face threats on a daily basis or more. I understand many on the left do as well. But I can just tell you, based on the events we hold versus the events we see on the left, the amount of security we have is substantially higher. I'm not going to explain in detail the security details of my friends and other commentators, but let me just start by saying the conversations with liberals and the shows that I know don't have 24/7 armed guards surrounding their homes for the most part, even among lesser-known personalities on the right. There are people on the right who are not as famous as Charlie and others who have to live under 24/7 armed guard and surveillance because of the threats that we face. We here at Timcast were swatted 15 times in 1 year. The bomb squad was deployed twice. Our studio had been evacuated mid-show. A man in a dress showed up to our property, for which it's an old property, we're no longer there, and attacked one of the residents as they were lurking around the property filming. There are many other security breaches that we've had that I do not discuss because I don't want to explain how these people have breached our security. But let's just say it's resulted in prosecutions, law enforcement intervention, and it is a common occurrence for us. Considering what just happened to Charlie, we're all taking everything very, very seriously. But I am, of course, personally curious to understand where we are headed in this country, what is the underlying cause. And I personally just will not tolerate this both sidesism. A poll was released yesterday by Political Polls, YouGov data, showing that 77% of Republicans believe it is always unacceptable to gloat over the death of someone they oppose, while only 30% of Democrats share that view. In total, about 70% of Democrats believe it may be in certain circumstances unacceptable to gloat over the death of your opponents. About 90% of Republicans say in some circumstances it is unacceptable, with 77 saying it is always unacceptable. So when they go on TV and say, like Chris Cuomo did, he said to Benny Johnson of Charlie Kirk, "You guys are not victims. You give as good as you get." It is disgusting, and I won't stand for it. But forgive me for ranting as we launch the show. We have a big panel today, and I'll just let you guys introduce yourselves. Dr. Josef, if you want to start first.
Yeah, sure. So briefly, I would just say I'm kind of like America's anti-psychiatrist. I have very critical views about medications. I talk about the interface of psychiatric drugs and violence. I also talk about the massive overprescribing epidemic going on in the country right now, the complete insanity about how we diagnose everyone with like brain illnesses when they're actually dealing with real problems. And so that is my shtick. And when I'm not doing that, I'm helping people come off psychiatric meds.
Right on.
My name is Laura Delano, and I am a former psychiatric patient. I grew up spent the most formative years of my life deeply invested in this idea that I had all these diagnoses and needed all these medications for life, and that my purpose in life was to go to therapy and refill my prescriptions. And the more I kind of internalized this way of understanding myself, the more my life fell apart. And I wrote a book about it called Unshrunk that I highly recommend. And like Josef, a lot of my work is about helping people who've realized the mental health industry is not actually helping them, and they want to kind of take their lives back from meds and from kind of professional patient identity.
Right on. Libby is here.
I'm Libby Emmons. I'm here. I'm actually really glad to talk about this with you guys. I have a son who's 15, and this has been something that's come up over the years with different educators and everything, and so I'm really interested to hear your insights.
Yeah, it's very prescient that you're here. Also, I've been inundated with this guy Chase Hughes. He's a psychologist and says like the psyop is left versus right. They want you to think of other. They want you to other people, and I think a lot of it is just people broken and distanced because of over medication. I mean, I do, but anyway, we'll talk about it later. We also have the man, the myth, the legend.
I don't know about that. The real legend of Charlie Kirk that we lost. Today's going to be an emotional day. It's a very sad, tough conversation to talk about losing such an important person like Charlie. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. But I know that obviously we do have a mental health issue because it's just the overprescription of drugs, and you see the correlation with shootings like this. It's just so prevalent, and then the media doesn't talk about it. But I don't know in Charlie's instance, and I don't want to get into the conspiracies of it. But it's
a
just,
suspect in the assassin.
Just a bad day, very bad day, Tim. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I want to start by just giving people the quick update for those that are tuning in. Normally, as I mentioned, this is typically just a conversational debate podcast on topics, not so much news related, but I want to get started by showing this breaking news report. They've revealed the language that is on the bullets, the engravings. One reading, "Hey fascist, catch." One reading, "Oh Bella Ciao." One reading, "If you read this, you are gay." Now, interestingly, and this is very interesting, this is CBN, did not include the other engraving, which said, "Notices bulge, OWO, what's this?" And so I want to make sure I can pull that up. And the reason this phrase is going viral, the reason I think people are not mentioning this is because, let me see if I can, Know Your Meme, I think, has the news. I think CBN and other outlets don't know what this means. So when they heard that, they thought it was random nonsense. Know Your Meme says, "Notices bulge, OWO, what's this?" This is the original meme referenced by Tyler Robinson, Charlie Kirk's alleged shooter. And it's furry porn reference. And that's it, right? So we have Urban Dictionary. And it says, quote, "Snuggles and pounces on you and notices bulge. Ooh, what's this?" And we also have the reference to Bella Ciao. "Hey fascist, catch" is particularly obvious what that means. So this individual apparently was at home having dinner with family. The family was expressing disdain for Charlie and the things he had been saying. And that, as well as the inscriptions, the opinions expressed by the individual, I think it is beyond a reasonable doubt, at least according to the evidence presented, this individual was Antifa-aligned, leftist-aligned, and targeted Charlie for his politics. Now, we're hearing a lot from the media, from these personalities. Chris Cuomo had a viral clip where he said, "I do not see you as victims. You give as good as you get." That's his quote. I believe he apologized. Political polls says, YouGov data, 77% of Republicans believe it is always unacceptable to feel joy at the death of someone they oppose, while only 38% of Democrats share this view. 33% of Democrats think it's usually unacceptable, whereas only 12% of Republicans, that is, the majority of Republicans say it's never acceptable. It's always unacceptable. And among those on the democratically aligned who believe it's either always or sometimes acceptable, 11% compared to Republicans, 6%. And 4% of Democrats believe it is always acceptable to gloat over the death of a public figure they oppose, while Republicans are at 2%. I'm curious what you guys think about the state of political violence. Obviously, I've made my point several times already that it is clearly lopsided. The left is either substantially more willing to engage in the rhetoric. They're doing it now. They're gloating over Charlie's death. And I'm going to stress this, even with the opinions people have expressed about George Floyd on the right. When George Floyd died, every conservative, even Ben Shapiro, was saying this is bad. It was wrong. When Charlie dies, they post memes saying he got what he deserved. Or they're selling T-shirts and they're saying, debate this.
I was sad about Floyd. I mean, the whole thing was tragic. He was in the front seat I think he was high with kids in the back seat, and he was in the driver's seat. That was terrible, terrifying on every level. But like, I'm thinking about Muammar Gaddafi and the way they gloated over his death because of the way he treated them. And like in war, you're kind of glad when the enemy's gone. Like, and maybe the soldiers don't gloat. I would have to ask people that have actually killed for a living or that do this, like this is like their thing. I think there's no joy in what you do. It's just, it has to be done. But there's also like a relief that comes when the enemy is no longer, because you're no longer threatened. You feel no longer threatened. And I don't think that the domestic situation calls for that. We're not at war with ourselves right now. And there's no reason to create that energy.
I mean, we've been hearing messages from left-leaning media for a long time that, you know, if you have certain opinions that are, you know, not, you know, the usual kind of woke talking points, you're a fascist and you're dangerous and you should be silenced. And I think if you keep on hearing that stuff, after a while you feel emboldened to act on it. And you feel like you're actually doing something good when you're really doing something horrific.
Have you noticed any correlation in your career with giving people psychiatric medication that they will do, or that someone that's medicated will tend towards like a dissociative lash out of some sort?
Yeah. And so all of these medications, and I know this is covered up in a big way, all of these medications have the ability to make people violent. And this is not even hidden. This is already in the drug labels. I mean, we're not talking about common side effects. We're talking about rare things that happen. And then the analogy that I usually use is you could have like 10 people smoking cannabis. One person becomes paranoid. The rest of them are giggling and laughing. And so you can have these unexpected reactions to things. And when you have like 15% plus of the population taking SSRIs, you know, over 20% taking psychiatric medications, which are already known to cause violence in the FDA labels, you're going to get these 1 in a million cases that happen where you have people, you know, they'll engage, you know, they'll kill people. The homicides will happen, suicides will happen, and it's completely covered up. The media does this out of a place of, it's like almost compassion, but it's kind of twisted because we need to be talking about these things. They say, you can't talk about the link between violence and psychiatric meds because you're going to scare people away from life-saving medications.
Right, but there's a big concern with that, which is, I mean, I've watched these drug ads, and at the end they say may cause anything from diarrhea to suicide. And personally, I don't want to take a drug that does either of those things.
Yeah. And the insane thing is, especially when we're looking at the population who is below 25, who are the most likely to have side effects, you look at the clinical trials, there is a higher rate of suicide attempts in the people who are put on these medications. So at a population level, you're more likely to try and take your life if you're put on an antidepressant than if you're given placebo. It is insanity giving these medications out the way we are to kids right now.
I guess the argument would be that they're already suicidal, which is why they're going on psychiatric meds to begin with, and that they were already more likely to do it.
That's not really what happens. I mean, so I brought up my son as an example, who's a healthy, jovial 15-year-old boy, and when he was just in, I think it might have been pre-K. He was in pre-K. He was going to this school. And he kept getting in trouble. He was always getting in trouble. And I was getting called in to the office to talk to the teacher. I was getting all these notes home all the time. Well, he's running in circles at circle time. And I was like, well, that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, it's circle time. Like, what's circle? He's supposed to sit on a circle and be quiet and just sit there. And I was like, okay, you're calling it circle time. He's running in circles. Like, maybe he's just smarter than you, you know? Number of times it was, he doesn't want to sit still. He doesn't want to do his assignment. He wants to jiggle around in his chair. Have you considered getting him evaluated for ADHD? Have you considered this and that? And every time me and his dad were like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Well, would you consider it will help him in school? Maybe he needs a prescription. And we were like, Nope. Maybe have more recess. We're not doing any of these things. And it was shocking the number of times that they insisted to us that this happy, healthy, rambunctious, excited for life, jubilant little boy was like a problem. And all of the things that they were telling me were a problem are like signs of life. There was never any issues. And in fact, like he told me recently that as a kid, he would sometimes have like emotional outbursts, right? Who doesn't? You're a little kid. And he recently told me, he said, I'm really proud of how I have my whole emotional situation under control. I worked on getting that under control so that I could react the way I want to and not the way, that I just do off the spur of the moment. And I was like, that's the goal. That's awesome.
It's so typical of what we do in the US with the mental health system. I mean, we want to put problems in people's brains, rather than actually like looking at the school or the society or the problems going on in the families or all of these things. It's so much more convenient to say, Libby, your son has a brain disorder. It's ADHD. You don't need to look at anything else, at least not our school and our programming, and that is not interesting to your son. Go and see him to get evaluated. And that is exactly what's wrong with mental health in this country. That's why it's getting worse, even though we're using more and more drugs than ever before. That's why suicide rates are higher, because it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, as someone who grew up medicated, I was put on these drugs as a kid, and I took them through my teens and my 20s. What makes it especially insidious when it comes to medicating and diagnosing kids is that you don't yet have a baseline sense of who you are. You're just coming into yourself as an autonomous, agentic being when you're hitting puberty, as I was when I was first medicated. And so you don't even realize, having been on these meds for basically a decade and a half, I had no idea what I was losing and what I never got access to because I had no baseline to refer back to. I didn't have, decades lived and then started a medication in my 40s and then realized like, wow, I'm kind of losing touch with my sexual function or my personality. I had no baseline. And I think a lot of this, like, I'm not going to speculate about psych drugs in any of these killings. It's obviously so complicated. But what I can say for myself, having been heavily medicated, having tried to kill myself in a very extreme way in my mid-20s, is that a lot of this, I think, is about disembodiment at a deeper, like, spiritual level. Even I think you can't wish violence against someone else or be happy when someone else is killed unless you are out of touch with your own humanity. You cannot dehumanize someone else unless you yourself are dehumanized. And I do think that the psychiatric drug issue, while I'm not going to, say it's causing anything, I think it's a big piece of this puzzle because with so many young people growing up medicated, growing up disconnected from their instincts, from their capacity to feel empathy, to feel compassion, that was my experience. I'm not saying it's the experience of everyone on these drugs, but I know I'm far from alone. And, to think back to that moment when I made the decision to kill myself, it made total sense to me. It was perfectly logical, given the story I was believing about, having this incurable brain disease, like Josef said. Like, the reason I feel this way isn't because of my relationship to the world around me. It's because I have faulty brain chemicals. I've tried all these meds. I've seen the best doctors everywhere. I'm still getting worse. There's no point in going on. I truly believe I would not have reached that point of choosing to kill myself were I not disembodied, fundamentally disconnected from myself. And it's not just medications that do this. It's so many kind of facets of our society, social media, digitally mediated relationships, food, big food, you could go on and on, all the ways for disembodied.
Laura, I want to pick up that thread about, like, what we don't want to do is get to a place where we're just saying, anytime a mass shooting happens, it was due to psychiatric medications. I'll speak for myself. Clearly, there's an element of social contagion going on with these events. I may be unpopular by saying this, but clearly the availability of guns, if someone is highly unstable and there's a lot of guns around, they're grabbing a gun, they're not grabbing a knife.
Yeah, but real quick, the last 7 trans shooters were all on hormones.
Well, that's the thing. And so
or like SSRIs too.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were all on pills.
And so, Laura was talking a moment ago about feeling disembodied on psychiatric medications. And when experts have looked at this and they say, how do these drugs make people do this? Part of it is emotional blunting. If you blunt someone out with medications, you're going to blunt morality, you're going to blunt their conscience. They're not going to feel that same sense of responsibility. It's the same way that these drugs can lead to suicide. Many people don't want to take their life because they're worried about their families and the impact it's going to leave on people around them. But if you turn that way down, they're going to be way more like, many people can feel like, what's the point of living? I'm not feeling anything. They don't think about the consequences. And
there was a very interesting, I know we were all talking about Charlie Kirk earlier. A couple of years ago, I was at the Young Women's Leadership Summit, which was at one of the events that he did. And I was on a panel talking about faith and being, a person of faith living in a large liberal city. I was in New York at the time. And a young woman stood up and she said something that was absolutely fascinating. And I've been thinking about it, pretty regularly for about 3 years. And she said, I don't think that we've really comprehended how far kids who grow up in liberal environments are removed from values. So, for example, when I grew up, the word soul was a very weird word. Like that's something that weird people said. So when people had to try and express their internal tumult, they would use words like I'm depressed or I'm anxious, or they would assign some sort of medical value to it. Another example is the way that people who grow up in liberal environments get a sense of purpose and meaning from being part of the Democratic Party or having, being part of a rebellion, she said, or even as we see now, people celebrating their mental illness and saying, oh, that's my, I'm a little autistic coming out. That's my ADHD coming out. That's my childhood trauma coming out. I have PTSD from one time my teacher yelled at me coming out or whatever. And she said, that's what she was saying. And this notion that the soul has been replaced with perceived medical conditions or mental conditions. And then this morning during the press conference with Governor Cox in Utah, one of the reporters said, is there any indication of mental illness? Do you find that perhaps we have taken what used to be meaning derived from faith or from, a community that has moral grounding to this other much more amorphous
we're lost
situation?
I think with the decline in, religious community, people are lost. I think they're lacking purpose. And when you go online, and, you could say it's, liberal politics. It could be like the trans community as well. It could be having a mental health condition. I follow social media a lot. And so I see things going on TikTok and these are communities that people are drawn into and they're kind of celebrated, especially on the left where there is this, there's a social currency almost with being a sexual minority or being someone with a mental health condition. It's like you are stigmatized, you are victimized, and we're going to bandy together and we're going to fight against the injustice. And so I think that you can have vulnerable people who are confused, who maybe don't have something like God and religion, get kind of pulled into these places to feel like they're a part of something. Mm-hmm. And the horrible
and to fill that place inside that's empty.
Yeah, so to me, a lot of this is about the ubiquity of medicalization, just as you were saying, Libby. We live. I think over the past 70 years. And I go into this in my book because when I was writing, it's mostly a memoir, but I realized I have to tell the bigger story of the American mental health industry here. To understand what happened to me, I have to investigate the bigger story of our country and how over the last 70 years, the rise of the mental health industry has kind of infused our meaning-making apparatus as a culture with medicalized discourse. So the deeper spiritual or existential or philosophical language that we until a second ago in the span of human history would use to understand ourselves get slowly replaced with lists of symptoms and clinicalese and just sterile jargon that gives the illusion of self-understanding. Because, I cannot tell you how much relief I felt at the beginning when I did embrace my various diagnoses, like, oh, wow, I can look at this list of symptoms. Yep. Oh my gosh, this is me. This is where I belong. Now I can feel validated and understood. I belong. And as Josef was saying, and as you were saying, Libby, like the fact that we are yearning for that speaks to the void in our culture of community, of a sense of belonging, and it makes me think of the philosopher and writer, social critic Ivan Illich, who was a former priest who wrote about how, all these various kind of industries in our culture, whether it's the medical industry or the education industry, they set out and kind of promote themselves as being these helping institutions that are going to solve X, Y, Z problem, but they actually end up perpetuating the very problem that they claim to set out to treat. And in the case of health, he called it this idea of medical nemesis, that the medical industry has kind of claimed this monopoly on what it means to be human, what it means to suffer, to struggle, to yearn, to feel desire. It's monopolized how we understand that for ourselves, which then monopolizes what you do with it. Because if you have a mental illness, then the only logical thing to do is to get treatment from a medical professional. But if you're having an existential crisis or a crisis of faith or a crisis of loneliness, then the solutions, quote unquote, are not necessarily going to be medical. And I think that's a big part of this.
So the issue that I think we have in this country is that mental illness is often stated by the right as an easy answer to a state of physical brain construction among large swaths of the population. That is, many of these people that are on the left, and I'm not saying it's only the left. I'm just saying we see it predominantly on the left. It is not that their brains don't work. Their brains are perfectly functioning. They just believe things that are not true. And so we've had this discussion before on this show as well as Timcast IRL. The difference between someone who is suffering from paranoid delusion, schizophrenia, somebody who might say that out of the corner of their eye, they always see little men trying to steal their stuff, and a voice tells them to chase them around, things like this. I had a friend who told me that she had a camera orbiting her body that was placed there by the government that spied on her, and she could see it floating around her, and she knows it's there. And she was being medicated. That is easily pointed out as, okay, there is something wrong with your brain. But what happens when someone is raised in a culture that tells them something as insane as, you can't see the camera floating around your body, but trust us, it's there. They don't actually see it. They don't hear anything, but they still live in this world where they believe the government has been implanting invisible orbiting cameras around them, something we know to be absolutely insane. There's no way to treat a form of developed psychotic delusion. I assume that you could always make an argument there is. I mean, what, deprogramming someone?
Pulling people out of a cult, that kind of mindset.
But we're talking about people who, if we go back to Donald Trump coming down the escalator, the saying goes that every 7 years, every cell in your body has been replaced. We are our own ship of Theseus. If anyone alive today has lived in the world of the corporate press, which is still right now lying. You know what? I want to pull up one of these lies. Every fiber of their being is screaming things that are not true. How do you actively? There's nothing you can do. Let me show you this tweet, for instance. ABC News tweeted, "Well, President Trump has called for an end to political violence following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He did not recognize or acknowledge the recent deaths, violent attacks, and killings of Democrats." Completely false. And as you can see with community notes, President Trump publicly responded offering condolences after the shooting of 2 Minnesota lawmakers. ABC News, this is not an accident. They have editors. They have teams of staff. CNN the other day, when the news broke from Steven Crowder that the bullets were engraved with anti-fascist and trans ideology, the Wall Street Journal confirmed this through their own source. CNN reported it was cultural issues engraved that were being analyzed. So there are people who exist only in that space who are told every day, Charlie Kirk hates black people. But that's fabricated. It's not real. Charlie Kirk, in one viral video that was actually recommended to me on Instagram, referred to a black child as a gift from God. This man was not racist. What do we do when we are dealing with a mental illness that was intentionally programmed by activist organizations to put people into a state of paranoid delusion that there are Nazis around every corner. There's no medication that will change that because this is a programming issue.
I mean, this breaks my heart because, I mean, the solution really was to have Charlie Kirk, because he was going out there to these universities and he was putting in FaceTime, having people like listen to him about these issues, having difficult questions, difficult conversations. And I mean, and that's what we really need more of. We need to humanize the other side. I love social media for that, although, you know, I get censored, and I know a lot of people do get censored for having these things. But I think the more we can break away from ABC News and like CNN and these places that have just a very, to me now, it's a very obvious narrative to serve their base rather than trying to be helpful and actually see things in a logical, rational way. The more exposure that we can have and get these ideas out there, I think that will de-radicalize people. I think they will wake up to it slowly, and I think it is happening.
I do think so. I'm. It's tough. I want to be optimistic. Following this brutal assassination of a political leader and friend, I was hoping that your more moderate or default liberals, who do believe things that are not true because of, as I described, would be shocked to see such a graphic and horrific incident. They weren't.
They weren't shocked at all.
I have friends, people that I've known for years, that work in Hollywood, that are prominent liberals, they're activists, but I always consider them to kind of be normie default libs that they post your generic talking point. And I genuinely believed yesterday that many of those people were going to be like, this is not okay, stop. And today I woke up and looked at Instagram stories from people that don't spend time in politics. They only just, you know, they post a black square profile picture for George Floyd. They'll repost some activist talking point. And I'm seeing several videos being shared by many of these individuals who are well known, justifying the death, saying things like, Charlie got the world that he wanted, so be it. Saying things that Charlie Kirk wanted to kill you, so they killed him. Saying things like, this is a man who genuinely hated black people and wanted them dead. All fake, all lies. And these were supposed to be sane, rational people that I knew, that I could still talk to. And I don't know how we move forward right now. There are posts on X with 20 million views of people saying, who's next? He deserved it.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what you were saying about what happens when you are raised in a culture that tells you there are invisible cameras circling your body, and you have the delusion. What happens when you're raised with delusion? And you also mentioned that these are not people who are particularly involved in politics. So what happens is they hear from trusted sources like ABC or MSNBC or the others that Charlie Kirk is a fascist, that this very Christian man who espoused peace is hateful and evil, right?
Or he's responsible for school shootings,
or he's
because he
responsible for all of these things.
Pro-Second Amendment, and
this
he got
man
what was
who,
coming.
This guy was political. He dressed up as Trump for Halloween.
No, not this guy. I mean, like in general, the people who are on social media saying this stuff, they're not steeped in politics, but they believe everything that they've heard that's negative about Charlie, and they've never looked into it themselves. Look at stupid Stephen King, right? He espoused this whole thing of like Charlie wanted to stone gay people or whatever, and then everyone was like, you are wrong. Look at the clip. Look at the clip.
He's got a viral post saying...
And he had to apologize. He apologized, but like that's not going viral.
He actually said that he couldn't stand the people that were trying to gatekeep the movement and keep gay people from the conservative movement.
Exactly.
Charlie did everything he could to lift up black conservatives and black people on the left, too, for that matter. So anybody that says that he was racist is just ignorant.
But he also had ideas that maybe were horrific or you disagreed with. He would debate you on them and change his mind if you offered a position. That was the thing. So I don't care. You give me a list of all the bad things he said, debate him on it. That was the point.
There's no reason whatsoever for this to happen to Charlie Kirk. Like, there's a million other people this could have happened to, and it would not have this effect. So this happening to Charlie Kirk is why this is so impactful.
This is what's scary, is that those of us who knew Charlie, and I don't just mean personally, I mean those who knew who he really was, knew that he was a really nice guy. He was not somebody who went on TV and was angry. There are a lot of people in the space, especially on the right, who are angry and are yelling and saying, you know what, these people, I'll tell you. That wasn't Charlie. And that's one of the reasons I think it was so impactful and horrifying is that Charlie was always really calm and nice. And at the bare minimum, the worst emotion you got from him when you debated him was him scoffing or laughing and saying, what? No, here's my idea. But he never yelled at you. He never insulted you. He would, I've seen so many of his videos. He would only, the closest he ever got is when he would give back what he was given. To the point that I was making about these people and their views, mentioning that they're raised in this society. They go online and they're surrounded by people saying, these people are fascists. Punch Nazis. Nazis are bad. The way I've explained it before is we all know that feeling because there are certain things you cannot do in public. There are certain things that if you do, you will be shunned or harassed or isolated and there are things you would react to. For instance, most people on the left and the right, if they witnessed a man yelling racial slurs at another man, would be mad about it and would say, hey, you can't do that. That's not okay. That is the overwhelming majority of this country. Racists exist. So we know that feeling of if you were sitting down at a restaurant and you saw a guy get up and start screaming at a black man and insulting him, was minding his own business or his family and calling him names, you would react viscerally. You work at the shop would say, get out of here. Don't you do that. So we understand that feeling. The problem is there is a generation and the liberal political faction that have been raised to believe that racist guy screaming racial slurs was you, me, was Charlie. So when someone comes out and tells them, imagine if someone said, that guy who was threatening to murder that black woman, calling her racial slurs and was taunting her and poured a milkshake on her head, walked outside and got hit by a car. People are going to be like,
yeah,
wow. And you're not really going to feel that bad. That's where liberals are right now. That's because of the lies, the intentional lies from ABC News, from CNN, from MSNBC. Remember MSNBC said when Charlie got shot, perhaps someone was firing celebratory gunfire?
They also said he was divisive.
And he said awful things, so he gets awful actions.
Right.
That's the world they're living in. And so, again, I'm kind of ranting because obviously it's so personal.
It also,
my point, sorry, just to finalize it. These are people who imagine they're on a boat. And all around them, that's the only thing they're told and they can see. They can't get to the ship or the landmass that we're on where we're welcoming of everybody. And what terrifies me the most about it is layered in this psychology that has been developed by these media organizations is if you talk to Charlie and he says something different from what we told you, it is because he is lying to trick you so that you abandon your values. And then every interaction these liberals have with any of us, there is a veil of, I know that if you agree with me, it's you lying to trick me, so I won't believe anything you say no matter what you say.
This is making me think of the role of, to get back to what you were talking about earlier, Libby, and I think actually I saw a great clip of you talking about this from recently. I think at the heart of this phenomenon that we're talking about, and I think it's across the culture and not even necessarily just political in nature, is the privileging of your emotions, especially your outrage and your anger, and basically letting your anger shape your perceptions of reality and define what you think of as true. And I think a lot of that, what is a part of the root of that, I think, is this ubiquity of therapeutic culture where so many young people, I was just doing an interview earlier this morning, and we were talking about the stat that 72% of Gen Z girls, women, 72% of them have their mental health condition, quote unquote, as a deeply important part of their identity.
Right.
And so young people are growing up, and I'll talk about what this was like for me because it was just so powerful. Being a 13-year-old girl who was confused and lost and insecure, wanting to feel like she belonged somewhere, to get kind of funneled into this. And I don't blame, my parents did the best they could.
What age did they put you on birth control?
That's a good question. Don't even get me started on birth control. I started birth control at 16. So I was on 5 psych drugs: lithium, Lamictal, Abilify, Effexor, and Ativan.
At the same time?
Same time.
That's crazy.
Was my last regimen back in 2010. 16 years of oral contraception. I don't even get me started on the pill.
At the best hospitals
I was on that
in
for
the country.
when I was 16 too, and it was kind of weird because I wasn't sexually active.
Oh yeah.
It was like this thing where just all the girls at my prep school were suddenly on birth control.
Totally. For me,
every girl at my school.
For me, it was for an eating disorder.
And this was all like affluent girls, just all of them.
Same with me. And so when you grow up in this, infused in this therapeutic landscape where you're like, as someone who was in therapy every week for a decade and a half, sometimes twice a week, and I'm just talking about myself, talking about my mind, talking about my thoughts, talking about my insecurities, my anger, my emotions, and it's just getting more and more reinforced that the most important thing in my life to focus on is myself and my feelings. I think when you think about that phenomenon in an individual and how it can shape their own reality, and then you pan out and you think about how many young adults grew up in therapy, privileging their emotions, and then you think, okay, it kind of makes sense. We're in this polarized, like Tim, you were saying, people are literally living in different realities. Literally.
I mean, they constantly feel like a victim. You know, it's like I'm being oppressed by people out there. They're out to get me. Anything that they say is dangerous, and it's a lie. And look where it gets them. I don't think you can actually get anywhere really useful in life if you constantly feel like, you know, people are out to get me. They're you know, these people on the right and their ideas, and they're holding us down. Or even the mental health issue as well, where it's like, I have a brain disease. You know, my anxiety and depression is caused by my brain, and there's nothing that I can actually do to fix that problem. And unfortunately, that is a mentality. And I remember I was watching you on Tucker Carlson recently, Laura, and I think he said, you know, what would you have said to me if I said, hey, maybe, you know, medications aren't the answer, or there's not something? And I think you told him to F off or something like that. Like, it was so like deep.
Yeah, well, I cannot tell you how powerful it is to be taught to think that you have no agency or control over your life because your brain is defective. Like, I literally believed through these vital years when I was meant to be figuring out who I was as an adult in the world and like what I cared about and what my passions were, I was moving through every single day thinking, what's the point in really trying to grow or evolve as a person, because my brain is pathological. I have chemical imbalance in my brain that I'll never be able to get rid of. I can just manage it with pills. So like, what's the point in trying to become a more evolved person, to grow, to change? And I think that sense of disempowerment, that internalizing a mentally ill identity, you know, it stripped me of any belief that I could be an agent in my life. And I think, just to quickly, like, Tim, to your question earlier, like, you know, I can't remember exactly how you framed it, but I'm really cautious to medicalize violence ever, to call it mental illness, because it really does absolve responsibility. The idea is, if you're mentally ill, you did this not because you're a bad person or a lazy person or, you know, an immoral person, because you're sick and it's not your fault. And so I think we need to be really cautious when we medicalize any kind of
did you
violence.
see the DeCarlos Brown thing? They were like, oh, he has mental illness.
He's hurting, so he hurts.
It's like, does he not have a personality? Does he not have responsibility there? It's just like, he was in a crisis.
This is the corporate press, which we typically describe as more left-aligned, describes people as though they are animals without higher brain function. Mm-hmm. This man who made a decision to...
It's kind of true.
Exactly. So the way I've described it, as we've discussed on the show this past week, before the horrifying moments in Utah, was if you slathered yourself up in honey and peanut butter and carried some delicious trout into the woods, who is responsible for the attack on you?
The bear himself.
And that's the argument made by Democrats, which seems insane. We don't blame the bear for smelling food and chasing after it. However, when Irina Zarutska goes and sits on a train, not slathering herself up in anything, and is brutally murdered, they say, don't blame the murderer. He was hurting, so he hurt. It is absolutely insane. This was a man who made a choice, and they said, but he's unwell. And in fact,
he's so unwell.
This is important. Sorry. Van Jones attacked Charlie Kirk as a race monger for pointing out that this man attacked Irina Zarutska, a young white girl, and not anybody else on that who was sitting near him, who were black. And Van Jones said, to say it was because of race is just race mongering, after a decade of Van Jones himself, as well as many others in the corporate press, literally race mongering over instances that is no evidence that it was race motivated. And of course, then after this segment comes out, video emerges. I do believe the video was available, but became more prominent, in which it appears this man, DeCarlos, says, "I got that white girl. Charlie wasn't wrong." And on national television, Van Jones singled out Charlie Kirk as a race monger spreading hate against black people. And I believe it was perhaps 2 days later that a man who is, according to I think it's a fair prediction that there is a correlation between the words of Van Jones, and I know some people might say that's just distasteful for me to say, but as the press conference revealed, they said that this suspect was at home with his family when mention of Charlie Kirk coming to their town was brought up, and how the family member said he was hateful. And why did they think that Charlie Kirk was hateful? He wasn't. Because of people like Van Jones lying about what Charlie Kirk was saying. And then sure enough, this guy went and killed Charlie Kirk.
You asked earlier, how do you snap someone out of a world where they believe there are orbs flying around them, recording them?
Well, let me put a tag in that. I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to clarify. When I say that, I'm referring specifically to a person that I know, but let's make sure we clarify the point. What do you say to a person who was raised to believe incorrectly that around every corner are angry white supremacists looking to murder trans and black people?
And then there's my answer. You were saying it's people like Charlie Kirk that are the antidote to this kind of thing. Yes. People that can constantly, but there's also, you need to mitigate risk of susceptibility. So people that are susceptible to brainwash, somehow, whether it's dietary change, probably a lot of your intelligence starts in your gut. Getting people, like, less is more. Meditate. I mean, talk about meditation. Do it, because you'll notice it's a disembodiment yet a embodiment at the same moment. You sense things.
Let me try and translate that Ianism. The food you eat can destroy and damage your brain, but as much as I agree, and as we've cheered Maha on and talking about getting the garbage out of our foods, which does disrupt our hormones, does cause, in many instances, a variety of illnesses in our psyche. The distinction here is, while that is correct and true, and probably a large portion of what we're seeing, people living in cities, as you've pointed out before, breathing in brake dust every day. When you live in these cities, you are inundated endlessly with environmental toxins, which are attacking your senses and your mind and your body. But I will draw that distinction from the other point that I'm making as well, which I do say is with respect to your point, and it's a good point. The other point, of course, being people who are raised and being poisoned by false information, which creates a worldview where they genuinely believe that cops, for instance, murdered 20,000 unarmed black men in 1 year, when the number was actually 9 out of 300 million interactions. They live in a world of fabrication, a false reality. When someone is suffering from schizophrenia and there is something broken in their brain where they believe that they literally hear voices and they see things that aren't there. We prescribe drugs that we believe will stop those symptoms and help them connect more with reality. There's varying degrees of success, perhaps. But there's a big difference between someone who has just seen 800 times posts on Facebook saying white supremacists will kill you over and over and over again. CNN and ABC, trusted news sources saying the right is more dangerous. There's no medication for that.
No, I think less is more a lot of times too, is like reduce the things you're putting into yourself so that you can be more clear. And there are people I've seen like snapping out of this narrative in the last day or two where they're like, I can't be on the left anymore. This is insane that you would celebrate this. And people that are highly disembodied don't normally have those epiphanies.
Right, because they've silenced their own brains. They've silenced their own measure of cognition. But I think what you're saying about people snapping out of it takes something, right? It takes something for people to get out of this mindset. Like, I was raised pretty liberal and I went to, all the liberal schools and all the, I was in the arts, for goodness sake. Like, it's the most liberal area of our culture. And it took trans for me to be like, wait a second, that's not right. Men aren't women no matter what you do, no matter what you cut off or ingest or how you look or put on lipstick. You're not a woman. And so it takes something for people to be like, and then after that, I was like, oh, wait, if that's wrong, what else is wrong? Oh, all of these other things are completely wrong, are completely misidentified in our culture and are made up. But we have a situation now where not only are kids medicated and disassociated from themselves and started at a young age so that, and the same is true with the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones. It messes you up to the point where you don't grow up into the person who you are. You grow up into something else, something that's sort of malformed. But so what happens is, if that's what happens to you and you grow up this way and you're constantly scrolling and you never take in, and you're constantly navel gazing, like you were saying, you're constantly like looking inside yourself for all the truth of the universe, and your school is not great, which we know our education system is the pits right now. Where are you getting something? And nobody's taking their kids to church, you don't see a lot of that. I mean, my church is packed, which is awesome. It's the best church I've ever been to. But you're doing all of this to this kid. You're never feeding them Charles Dickens. You're never feeding them just some carrots and hummus. You're never feeding them their own, ability to explore the world. And you're just constantly feeding them a heavy dose of their own inner monologue. That's devastating. They're getting no fresh input. It's just all this closed circuit.
I think a lot of this, when I think about my own trajectory, because my kind of awakening was that you had, my equivalent was waking up to the fact that I'd basically been indoctrinated into a psychiatric framework for understanding myself. So that was my first onion layer that then began questioning many other onion layers. And when I think what the challenge here that you're getting at is, my own waking up process was a completely internally sourced aha moment. No one could have, the information was around me for years that there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance. And like Tim, even schizophrenia, even these serious diagnoses, it might sound shocking, but to date, there is zero evidence that even bipolar was my main label. Schizophrenia, bipolar, these serious labels, that there is actually any measurable pathology that's causing them. So the indoctrination goes deep. We're so trained to think it. No one could have forced me to see that. No one could have coerced me into changing my mind. Like you said, Libby, it's this internal aha moment that you have within yourself. And
you had that rock bottom, right? When you got involuntarily hospitalized and you realized your freedoms were getting taken away. And that sent you on a new trajectory where you're just like, this is not for me.
That is what woke me up, was realizing this system I'd been turning to for help for all these years, to care for me, is actually a system of control. I just hadn't seen it before because I had always said yes. And now that I'm saying no, I'm literally having my civil liberties stripped away from me and my bodily integrity violated by a drug I don't want to take. And I do think that's sometimes it is a forcing mechanism that is traumatic, that does wake you up. And you obviously don't want that to have to be what everyone has to go through to wake up. But
it often is, right? You need to have a rock bottom moment. Like if you have an ideology or a way of looking at the world that does not serve you and your life begins to suffer. And this could be thinking that, half of America is racist and because of that you don't get along with them. That's going to have an impact on your life. It's going to have an impact on your work. And ultimately, things don't work out for you. And when things don't work out for you, you become unhappy. And I guess one of the problems that we have with that is people aren't reflecting on these ways of moving through the world that aren't helping. They can then go to a doctor and just take a medication, and they can numb themselves to the fact that their life isn't working out, rather than looking at why.
Yeah, they said when someone was saying that if you spend a lot of your time doing easy things, you become a prey animal. You become, in like video games, if you're just always doing like no risk things, you become. And I've noticed with drugs, if I'm ever smoke pot, I'm like, what my main focus is feeling better. It's about my body and my self feeling. When I'm not, I care about my environment. How can I make my environment better? And if you make your environment better, you will feel better in the long run. That's what people are missing. They're chasing the high. They're chasing the feeling. And sometimes you just got to hit rock bottom. You got to fall apart. You got to break. And then you can rebuild.
Pain is good. You need that pain as direction in your life. And that's why we have such a big problem with just numbing it out all the time. This is the smoke alarm going off in your brain saying, hey, something is not working and you need to fix it.
You know what's funny? You mentioned change your environment, and you're talking about the smoke alarm. And years ago, I went to my doctor because I was having like a horrible time sleeping. I just could not sleep. I would fall asleep, then I would wake up, and I just could not sleep. And it had been like 2 months, 3 months of like just terrible sleep. And my doctor was like, okay, well, why don't we get you some Ambien, just like a heavy duty sleeping pill. So then I start taking the Ambien. And, you know, it was sort of fun because you get loopy. But I was like taking this Ambien, and then the same thing would happen, except instead of waking up all night, I was having nightmares all night. And I would wake up and I'd be like, oh, that's not better. Nightmares aren't better. And so after a week of that, I went to Sleepy's over the weekend and I bought all new pillows. And I literally, now I just buy new pillows if I'm having trouble sleeping. I never had that problem again. I went back to sleep. I was like, oh, perfect, comfy, sleep. I wake up, my covers are all smooth, haven't moved.
And that was like an easy fix. But imagine if the problem like that you weren't sleeping was there was an issue in your relationship, right? Or there was an issue at work that really needed to be addressed and you were ruminating on it, and you go and see a doctor and they go, Libby, it's the chemical imbalance, take the Ambien. That problem just like festers there and it doesn't go away. And then you're hooked on a drug instead of actually getting to the root of what was going on.
It's not because you're eating ice cream at midnight. That's not the issue.
Yeah.
You know?
And sometimes, I worry this there's been talk recently about transgenderism, the medications, and violence, really. And I know a couple of weeks ago there was this horrific attack at the Catholic Church
In Minneapolis.
in Minneapolis, where was it Robin or
it was Robert. Who called himself Robin Westman.
Went and did that, and then there were these notes about regretting transitioning, and to me, I just see that as the end outcome. You have someone who is confused, who ends up getting cheerleaded into transitioning, who knows what kind of hormone medications they were exposed to and what kind of psychiatric medications they were exposed to. And at the end, they become so bitter and angry with the world, like this bad ideology, and the fact that no one ever tried to direct this person back away from that. And kind of just, I imagine this person getting cheerleaded through transitioning and then onto medication and then just becoming so unstable, they take it out on society. I mean, it's just...
Not just regret, but not only did he have regret, but he was embarrassed that he'd ever done it in the first place and didn't see a way out. Didn't see a way to save face and get out of it.
Yeah, and this might sound a little cheesy, but I do think that this is where storytelling becomes so important, because that sense of hopelessness is too late for me. Like when I think about it in the context of people who are waking up to, being psychiatrized is the term I like to use, and you realize these 2 decades of these meds I've been on, have they permanently damaged me? Am I ever going to have a chance? You need stories of people who've gotten through. You need stories of people who've had the same experience, come through the other side. I mean, it's why I wrote my book, and it's why I think when you speak as a psychiatrist, when I speak as a former patient, framing it in our own personal journey, like you, Libby, talking about your own journey, I think that's what enables. Like to me, it's not going to be information and science and data and facts that changes people's minds. It's going to be helping people connect or even reconnect with their own hearts, which happens through telling stories. And I think that's a really important, and that people like Charlie, like people who are who care so deeply about bringing people together to share about their own perspectives, their own experiences, to create space where you can hear someone talking about their own journey through life, their own belief system. It's in those kinds of encounters that the opportunity to have your own aha moment, your own shift, your own, inspiration to actually change your mind, to evolve, to grow. I think it sounds cheesy, but to me, it's like that's where the power is.
In the modern age, particularly,
there's a reason it's cheesy. It's cheesy because it's real.
And it's amplified in the modern age with mass media, because if 5 people sit around and each give their personal anecdotes, in a day, 150 years ago, it would have happened, blink of an eye. Maybe there would have been some spiritual ramification. Now with internet video, it's persistent. People for 100 years will listen to that and remember. So as it can go bad with mass media and mass formation, you can mass form it into a really good mindset.
Well, I just want to say this, though. I think we're at like an inflection point where society is almost like post-apocalyptic right now. Like, I don't even know if there is a way to even go back with like the access to pornography on the internet. I mean, now that we have the internet, like, we're done. I mean, I don't know how a kid can even grow up and not like, I guess, be aged at such a rapid rate that doesn't even like match up with their puberty. So I think a lot of kids are mentally ill from the internet, and then they say when you start smoking marijuana, it actually stunts your maturity level at the age you start smoking marijuana. So like, we have a society of kids that are all on weed, all looking at porn, and it's just a dark world. And I'm not trying to be hopeless, but it's really hard to be successful in such a bad world.
I want to ask: Is there a medical term to describe a developed psychosis, a developed delusion?
Like one that you come up with?
No. I'm saying if you're surrounded by 100 people and they just keep telling you that Santa Claus at any moment is going to jump out and stab you, and then you start telling medical professionals that you're terrified and shaking and have anxiety because you know Santa's coming for you, is there a word to describe that?
Delusional disorder.
Even though it was something told to you that was you, like, so if a news anchor says, "Watch out," literally to 1 million people, Santa Claus is coming to get you, and then they start believing it, we call that standard delusional disorder.
Or reality, if enough people believe it.
Well, that's my point to what Alex is saying. We're dealing with a couple different phenomena. I've described this one in great detail, that in the end of the 2000s, Facebook switched from reverse chronological to algorithmic, meaning that we used to just see the posts of people we chose to see. Facebook, realizing that the amount of pages and friends a person had become too great and the feed moved too quickly, decided that to keep people on the page, they needed to prioritize posts with more engagement, and thus created the algorithmic social platform. What ended up happening was, if I post, "I'm going to the grocery store," nobody sees it. If you post a video of police beating a black man, literally everybody sees it. There were 10-year-olds at the time. And this is true. This did happen. So let me describe it a little bit more broadly. There were children at the time who were not supposed to be on Facebook, but of course were. Maybe they were 12, maybe they were 13. I think 13-year-olds are allowed to be on the platform. Facebook prioritized showing high engagement posts. So they began just showing nothing but police brutality videos. In fact, at the time, even Alex Jones and Paul Joseph Watson largely were covering the police brutality angle, as it was and if you were government critical or concerned about police overreach, it applied to you. And if you were left-aligned, anti-racist or whatever, which was not as prominent, it applied to you. There were websites that emerged, such as Mike.com, which was a Ron Paul libertarian love revolution site. And when they posted about police brutality, because it did align with libertarian values, the bigger reaction they got was from those who opposed racism. And so initially you post police brutality, you'll get X views. You then post a video of racism, you get Y views. But if you post a video about racist police brutality, you get XY. It is not, in fact, X plus Y, it is X times Y. And the reason why is the way the algorithms all work is in the early days of Reddit, the way their algorithm worked was for those not familiar with Reddit, you can make a post and people can choose up or down. Mm-hmm. You choose down, it disappears. If you choose up, it moves up. The first 10 votes in the first minute are equal to, and I think this was a while ago, 100 votes in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So what ends up happening is the algorithm is an exponential return rate. If there are 10 people who pay attention to police brutality and 10 people who pay attention to racism, and then you post racist police brutality, 20 people see it, it is a rapidly exponential boost in the algorithm, resulting in a series of early websites dedicated just to police brutality. In fact, one website cracked the top 500 websites in the world, literally only posting police brutality. It was like 430. And there are people there making six figures to millions of dollars. And all they would do every day is dig through archives to post and repost police brutality. Now, for a discerning adult, eventually you say, I get it. But for a child entering the world for the first time, the political world, on social media, the only thing you see in your feed, every video is a cop beating a black man. Now, in reality, these videos were spread out over a decade. These videos were a handful this year, a handful this year. They weren't always a cop murdering somebody, and there certainly are many videos of cops getting into fights with people. people who were posting these videos began to realize it doesn't matter what's true. It matters what we can post. We saw the rise of fake news websites that would just make things up. One of the viral stories was that BLM protesters blocked an ambulance carrying a dying young teenage girl. Got millions of views, was fake. They just literally made it up. But they made, 10 grand or whatever writing a story like that. This was what social media was. And so for someone who is 12 or 13, going on social media for the first time, for the next 5 years, the only thing they see, and I mean that hyperbolically, typically, majority of what they see will be, and I mean this sincerely, either police brutality videos against black people or people getting married, which were the highest profile, the highest algorithmic search or posts. So if someone wrote, I'm getting married and having a kid, you would appear at the top of everyone's feed because it typically would result in high engagement. People would exploit this by writing, I am getting married and having a kid. Psych, no, I'm not. I did that so that you would see this. We're having a party tomorrow. Come hang out. Mm-hmm. Now imagine what happens to a 13-year-old from 13 to 15 being told every single day, every time they open the app and scroll, that cops are just murdering black people. You get the George Floyd riots. Yeah. It is not that their brains are broken in some way. It is that their brains have been programmed in this way by the algorithms. I do not believe, and I'm not a medical expert, I do not believe it is possible to deprogram a child who has dealt with developmental years wired half their life in this direction. And I will add to this, right now we are dealing with the ongoing, what we call ElsaGate, which started in 2018, has never stopped. They claimed they stopped it, but it's not. Now there's the Jackson Agatha conspiracy that's going on where, what is it, the Great Circus or something? I don't know these shows. I don't watch these kid shows.
Wait, ElsaGate's like the child prawn that's on YouTube?
ElsaGate was when people started making half an hour long videos with no words, dressed like Elsa, Spider-Man, and Joker, chasing each other around. Elsa was pregnant. They would inject her with giant syringes, and it resulted in algorithmically generated content from people in India to make money of children eating feces out of toilets, of Peppa Pig having sex. To this day, we thought it ended, but it never did. To this day, there are videos of Sonic the Hedgehog being forcefully impregnated by machines that are being given to children on the YouTube Kids app. So when
Wait, Jim, there's nudity on YouTube. If you type in naked yoga,
yes, of course,
it's insane.
And they argue it's educational.
Yeah,
YouTube has videos explaining how to use sex toys for children. This is not an exaggeration.
Well, so does the school system in Vancouver.
Indeed, it does. But the point that I'm making is not about what is overt to an adult. The point I'm making is that there is a 6-year-old right now whose mother has given him a tablet, and he is watching videos of Sonic the Hedgehog, and I am not exaggerating, being grabbed by metallic arms, having an arm jammed into his body to impregnate him. And there are videos of conveyor belts where they attach large butt cheeks to Sonic, Knuckles, Tails, and what's her name? Rosa or whatever. I don't know the character. I only know Sonic and Knuckles and Tails because that's the game that I had. Children are watching these things. When we talk about Facebook blasting people with police brutality videos, or how about these memes that are lying about Charlie Kirk, for instance? A 15-year-old 10 years ago saw nothing but lies from the left that generate content. The fake news epidemic and misinformation they warned us about has never been dealt with on the left because they were willing to ban the right, but not the left. Even Twitch to this day.
And that's the big problem. Places like YouTube, they have a liberal bias. And so you're going to sit there in your echo chamber digesting all of this content about, Charlie Kirk's so racist. Charlie Kirk is against, transgender folks. Matt Walsh, all of these folks, and it will radicalize them against it because opposing points of view, like when you're in a left-leaning, like if you're a YouTube or something like that and your content moderators are all left-leaning, the other side is getting shut down. It is getting throttled. And so that's why you get people radicalized like that. And they're just going to hear, we need to go out and we need to fight against the conservative influences because transgender people are dying. And it's because of them. It's because of, Catholics. And you get this school shooting that happened the church shooting that happened 2 weeks ago. And so, yes, it gets views, but it is radicalizing people in this really dark and twisted way.
I kind of think the kids...
Just real quick, I want to highlight some of this. I want to give a shout out to Caleb is Salty on YouTube, if we could pull up this image, who made a great hour-long documentary breaking down this phenomenon. It is shocking to me in that 7 years ago, I covered this on this channel. We called it Elsagate. That this phenomenon had been happening where they were showing Peppa Pig and cartoon animals being forcefully impregnated and injected. The content was getting so many views that it actually resulted in real-world instances where an adult man, and this is there was one video that had 7 million views, was injecting his daughter in the butt with a syringe. The assumption was that it was saline, but the video itself generated so much attention that he would make a video as such. Caleb Isalti put out this video 3 months ago. Brewing cute pregnant factory. And there's Sonic the Hedgehog pregnant. Here's Rose and Knuckles with big butt cheeks and Sonic with crazy teeth. This is on the YouTube Kids app. And the point I'm bringing up, to go back to the original point I'm making, I cite these things because as a reasonable adult on the left or the right, you understand this is twisting and fracturing the brain of a child. Mm-hmm. They will suffer developmental disabilities and delusions later in life, as well as other psychiatric disorders based on being inundated every day with this psychotic content. What the average adult on the left does not understand is they are being inundated with the exact same content in the political space. Mm-hmm. So when someone like Brian Tyler Cohen has a channel that is literally nothing but screenshots of Donald Trump and titles saying Trump evil, Trump wrong, Trump fascist, and maybe only 1 in 10 is actually about someone else, it is Elsagate for adults. Now, the problem is when an adult looks at Sonic pregnant, they say, okay, this is crazy. You shouldn't watch this. But when someone tells them, here's normal political content, and YouTube promotes it in the exact same way, the adult's brain is fried. They see video after video after video of Charlie Kirk with lies about what he said, quotes out of context, and much like a child thinks men can get pregnant or they have some kind of weird brain disorder based on the hot dog Spider-Man videos that are coming out, the injection videos that are coming out, adults start to think fake things, and I don't believe, and I hope I'm wrong, but I do not believe when a human being has been wired for half their life, starting from childhood, to believe certain things to be true, that you can rewire that in their brain in any way.
You can. Social contagion is like erosion. It happens slowly over time. And then extreme events like what we saw on Wednesday can shatter the mountain into a new shape.
Indeed, I disagree in that I'm referring to 3-year-olds that are being shown videos of Sonic the Hedgehog being grabbed by metallic arms, jammed into his rectum to impregnate his body. And the parents are making children watch 3 hours a day of this. And it's been going on for 7 years. And these kids are going to grow up. When there are many famous stories of children who have been kidnapped and held in captivity for a long time. There is the famous story of the apocryphal girl raised by wolves. They found a young girl living in a dog kennel. She was unable to learn English.
That's right.
The most she could learn was eat, tired, very simple grunts. And what they said in this story, and many others like this, is that after a certain point, the brain is much more developed and solidified and cannot be wired to understand these things.
I'm actually fascinated with neurogenesis, and psilocybin has been medically aligned. They say that in studies, it will cause people to grow new brain pathways and for the...
Perhaps I don't want to deviate into whatever that is.
But maybe it's a form of therapy.
There is a video
neurogenesis
of U.S. troops in Iraq and Afghanistan trying to teach adult men how to do jumping jacks. I think there's a more formal term for jumping jacks, and they can't.
Why?
These are because their brains never developed the neural pathways to understand this type of mimicry.
Jeez, it's like teaching a person to walk again after they've been paralyzed for a decade or something.
It's not possible.
Well, the brain is malleable.
A person, perhaps, maybe I'm wrong. My argument is there are certain things your brain develops to understand. As an adult who's become paralyzed and has to relearn how to walk, the brain already has the concept of walking, but is just trying to figure out how to get the signals back to that part of the body. A brain that has never developed the neural pathways to walk likely will not.
Maybe that's cognitive dissonance.
It's not. And this is why you can read all of these different stories about young boys or girls who were raised in a basement locked in a cage when they're now 17 or 18, and they try to teach English to them, and they can't learn to speak at all.
I think it is. These are the children of the apocalypse. You brought up the word apocalypse. It's a Greek word that means to take away the veil. Apo means to take away, and the veil is calypse, is the veil. So it happened abruptly with the internet. The veil has been removed. Children at age 6 are seeing all this stuff. They're being...
The veil is not taken away.
Well,
it's
partially,
the inverse.
maybe
The
not
veil,
completely, but
the veil has been placed before them. Yes,
we
a
used to
child.
not see this stuff until...
And that's what the veil is. A child should be seeing a handful of things when they're in developmental years, such as the work the father is doing, the work the mother is doing. They see communication between mother and father about how they're going to live. Every day, my daughter is staring at my wife as she's explaining to me something about business, and she is absorbing that communication and that language and those logical pathways. This is also why we show her shapes, why we have ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, so that the brain will develop these pathways. Never in the existence of humanity has a child been forced to watch hours of Sonic the Hedgehog, and it's ridiculous to say, being forcefully impregnated, or monstrous Sonic screaming at the butt cheeks of Knuckles. And this is just one example in this video. This is not removing the veil. It is placing before them a nightmare reality. It is putting them in Plato's cave.
That's an interesting look at it.
I don't believe...
Like, there's a lot more going on than just what we're seeing on YouTube.
Let's step back from the sheer absurdity that is pregnant Sonic the Hedgehog. And the example that I use, as absurd as it is to exemplify the psychosis that we are experiencing as a society pertaining to politics.
Yeah.
When we see pregnant Sonic collectively as human beings, we can say that is insane. But when they put up a video and they claim Charlie Kirk said that black women don't have the brain power to hold jobs, which he never did and is a lie, they don't understand on the left. They are looking at the political equivalent of a pregnant Sonic the Hedgehog. And we cannot cure them of that. Now, certainly these people, many of them that are older, grew up in a world where this wasn't the case, and they have within their brains the wiring to be broken out of this. Typically, it results in a painful experience, as Brendan Strzok described when it was proven to him that Trump was not mocking a disabled man. He said he felt physical pain, that his body ached when he realized his worldview was wrong. But this is a man in Brandon who grew up in a sane reality. For a child that grows up in this reality of police brutality, fascism, and violence, look at the young people that we're seeing in Gen Z that are 20 years old. 7 years ago, they're 13 years old. They don't care for politics. They're beginning to watch this psychotic content. I'm saying 7 years ago was Elsagate. Mm-hmm. They see this brain-frying garbage. But they also see the far left lying about police brutality, about fascism, about Nazis, about the right, about Trump. Think about this. It has been 10 years, just about, it's been a little bit more than 10 years since Trump descended that escalator.
2015, yeah.
2015. That means a 10-year-old who didn't know anything about it was sitting there on the news, as they said, a neo-Nazi fascist white supremacist is trying to be president. And they were, that means for half of their life, let's go with an 8-year-old, someone who's going to be voting in this next election. For more than half of their life, they have been told over and over and over again, Sonic is pregnant. And I say that figuratively, when they call Trump a Nazi, when they call Charlie Kirk a Nazi, or me, or anybody else. How do you cure someone of their entire mental state?
The first step is you remove them from the cult. And you turn the TV off, basically.
It's called trauma-based mind control, Tim. So it's done on purpose. Like, they try to demoralize young people and basically fear us into compliance. So that's basically what's happening to these young kids. And I think the psychotropic drugs, too, kind of help them be more compliant. So
I just, to simplify, you are not going to go to me or Alex and say to me, did you know that 2 + 2 = 5? They tried that. Mm-hmm. And liberals all said it did. And they made up insane reasons to justify their ridiculous fake math. No one will ever come to me and say, actually, Tim, gravity doesn't exist, and it's only because you imagine it. Wait. You're never going to tell someone that a fundamental truth of their life is wrong and have them believe you.
Unless you have evidence.
No.
Sometimes.
No
That's
amount of
wrong.
evidence can convince an idiot.
Well, that's what science is.
You are absolutely 100% incorrect,
No, that's
Ian.
what science is.
It is fact. And you know, you guys tell me, when people are confronted with evidence that defies their worldview, they have an emotional anger response. But I am not talking about someone hearing in the news a month ago that Charlie kicked a dog, and then you going to them today and saying, no, he didn't, I'll prove it, and then being like, well, I don't believe you, and then showing them and they go, well, I guess I was wrong. I'm talking about someone who, as a baby, was told that the earth is flat, that there's a giant hole at the center in the North Pole. There are fundamental truths that we believe. You can throw a rock at a window, it's going to break. You will not be able to go to the average person, or I should say, and nothing's absolute, so 99% of the time, someone who is raised to believe something, and then you go to them and say, I can prove to you it's not true. You know what they're going to say? You're the demon they told me about and the liar, and I will never believe you.
Yeah, you need like an authority badge sometimes to get. Well, you got to get them to lower their defenses.
The sun doesn't exist.
If you have evidence, show it to the scientific community, and if it's true, I'll believe it.
So I can show you all the evidence the Earth is flat.
But there is a lot
never
of evidence
believe
for
it.
that. But the scientific community also says,
and you laughed, and
I laughed because Alex started talking when you said flat Earth.
because there's evidence.
there is a lot of evidence for it, but neither here nor there. I don't know. I can't even.
You'll never believe the Earth is flat.
But some people do escape, right? I mean, we've got people who get raised in cults and raised in Scientology, and later on they decide they're able to break out of that. I mean, what's different about those people that can escape and the others that just stay stuck in there forever, even though it's functional?
I would say nothing is absolute, and you make a good point.
Yeah.
But I would also counter with, in that regard, I do believe there is hope for a lot of people. I'm not saying it's impossible to stop the political hate. The political world and the divide that we see is still rooted in reality. It's just, I should say, has a basis in reality, but it's just fake. Charlie Kirk was not a Nazi. That's a lie.
Yeah.
He never said these things. They're making them up. It is very, very hard to break someone out of a 10-year developmental path.
You know, some chart.
But you are right about former Scientologists or whatever, people who are in cults. They do break free. The issue that I think is very great to us now is these kids were raised in a society where they were told one person does one thing, and that is easy to leave and experience something totally different. My concern is the wiring of the brain of an individual at a very, very young age when, the neuroplasticity of a baby is being wired in a direction that they will grow up and they will not be able to rewire. Such as the point I'm making where children who are raised in dog cages, who are rescued later on, can't learn to speak.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, I remember sort of coming out of the left, and there were a lot of things that were like very difficult for me to grapple with. And I was like, no, that can't be. Like, that doesn't work. And some things I remember very distinctly being like, we're going to put aside that core belief for now, and we're going to come back to it later because I can't deal with overturning that right away. And I was raised by smart people. My parents are attorneys, and they both would talk to me a lot and everything. I'm very widely read. And even so, after decades of essentially I wouldn't say necessarily liberal indoctrination because that doesn't feel very good to say that, but going to different educational institutions, being given the Ambien, being on birth control for 16 years, friends on SSRIs, you look at it and you're like, that can't be real. Really? Our entire educational system is wrong? That was the big one for me, was looking at education, which my family had always put so much stock in. And it's hard. It is, I remember Brandon saying that physical feeling, and it's really hard.
I do think a good example of this is, I request, Ian, that you try and convince Jack Posobiec that Jesus is not Lord and was not resurrected.
Well, it's up to him to prove that he was, because I don't trust the media. I don't mean, if the book tells me something's true, you gotta show me the evidence.
And how does that prove? How does that change Jack's mind?
Well, I mean, does he believe the media?
Jack believes what he believes, and you have to convince him otherwise.
It's a piece of media. If he believes the media at face value, then he can do that. I can't.
So you agree
force
with
people
me
to stop.
So you agree with me that you will not change the minds of people.
I can provide a better world. I can provide a better way to think. And if they think this is better than that, then they'll choose to change.
So you agree with my point early on, and you're changing your view.
Well, the thing is Shabbat. I just learned yesterday, Charlie.
Don't change the
Charlie
subject.
observes Shabbat, and that's
answer the
yourself
question
from the cult. Is
answer the question.
Turning the TV off on Saturday.
Answer the question.
The question is, you can't force someone to change, but you can provide a better world for them to change to.
You told me that people will change their minds when confronted by evidence.
Sometimes, yeah.
And do you think you can convince a Christian that Jesus is not Lord?
I don't know that. I'm an agnostic. I don't know if he was Lord or not.
I mean, there's so much more that goes into it than evidence. I mean, we're talking about social connections as well. Some of these beliefs exist in these communities, and if you veer from them, you're ostracized. And so there's immense pressure just to hang on to them as well.
In fact, I agree. I think that's one of the only reasons people actually change their views. These people there are people who were raised Catholic, raised Christian or Orthodox, and then leave the church. And you'll tend to find the reason they do is that they moved to the city, surrounded themselves by other people, and then adopted the views of those that surround them as a survival mechanism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, they won't say that. They'll just be like, no, I really don't believe it anymore. But this is the psychology.
At the heart, we're talking about how, because whether it's this unspeakably horrible example here, or just more broadly, the fact that as human beings who have evolved until a split second ago in our history to live in very much a world that is not this, like we're out of alignment with our true nature as human beings. And you could kind of make the case that whether it was industrialization or even going all the way back to agriculture, that technology and the evolution of technology has progressively interfered with how we have evolved as animals, basically. And that whether it's this or whether it's the fact that so many of us are eating food made in a factory, or whether it's, psych drugs, or whether it's, fluorescent lights, or, at the end of the day, we have profoundly interfered with our design. And like you're saying, Tim, in ways that are irreparable. And so I think you're probably right that when you grow up in your earliest years of life in an environment that is not enabling you to become who you fully are, you may not be able to come back from that. I think about this for me all the time. Growing up on psych drugs and the pill, I am sure that my body has been irrevocably altered in ways that I won't get back. But that is being a human being in this industrial age that we are in. And so I think then it becomes about, so what do we do with that? And I think that's where it's simple things like whether it's storytelling or whether it's like getting back into reality. Like you're saying, like turn off the fucking screen, excuse my language. Meet your neighbors, like grow food and eat it. It sounds so cliche, but the fact that it's cliche is crazy. Like the only solution here is to come back into our nature as much as we can, given that we live in this age that is profoundly disruptive.
That was when I mentioned Charlie 5 minutes ago or something about Shabbat. I didn't know he was a Christian, but he observed Shabbat Saturday as the Jewish tradition where he would just turn off the TV and be with his family. And I think when you're in this world without the TVs, you realize it's better than that world. I want to be here.
Yes.
Well, I think like probably one of the biggest problems of society is like when the Rothschilds, even though they controlled all the books, also when they made all of our medicine petroleum based and we stopped doing homeopathic stuff. And that was really the main downfall of society as well, the over medication. And then the fact that obviously we can advertise these pharmaceuticals. Like we just have a system that is, it makes it easy for people to get rich off selling garbage that doesn't really help us.
Snake oil salesman of the 21st century.
Well, and look at the situation we have now, right? Where we have RFK Jr., who has been very adamant that we don't need all these drugs, right? And he has been very adamant about getting the artificial dyes and products out of our food, which I think is so essential and important. I mean, you go to the grocery store, you're shopping for your kid, you look at the ingredients and you're like, no, I'm not buying that. I'm just going to buy a bunch of fruit, and some fish. Like maybe not even the fish, just let's see where we do. But you see how angry Democrats in Congress have been getting when he says, hey, so for this COVID vaccine, we're going to pull the emergency use authorization. And we're going to say that healthy people, in normal age groups from children to adults who are not elderly, don't need it. If your doctor thinks you should have it and you want to talk to your doctor about it, you can get a prescription and go get it, just like anything else. But little kids don't need it. Healthy kids don't need it. And if you do need it over the counter and you are in these certain groups, asthmatic or elderly, you can get it at the pharmacy. And I don't remember ever in my life until COVID getting any kind of drug at the pharmacy that wasn't like some Advil. You don't go to the pharmacist and say, hey, give me this controlled substance from Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer or whatever. You go to your doctor. Like when my son was getting his inoculation, I guess they're not vaccines, when he was getting that, get the MMR, whatever vaccines, you go to the doctor and the doctor says, this is what we're looking at. These are the vaccines you're going to get today. You get them at the doctor's office. How did we normalize this idea? And Liz Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Kathy Hochul, everyone gets so mad that suddenly you can't get pharmaceuticals over the counter without consulting a doctor.
It's a great question.
And what's next? Like, are they going to be and there's more, right? That you can get Plan B over the counter. That's a dangerous substance.
I think about this phenomenon a lot because in the psychiatric context, it's relevant. Watching the outrage at my book. Like, interestingly, I've had a lot of coverage from corporate media, which has been really interesting. Some of it's been positive. Some of it's been vitriolic, as to be expected. But what often happens is,
what's it called? I can't say it from here.
Unshrunk, a story of psychiatric treatment resistance. And I brought a copy for you.
Oh, thank you.
And so my story is just my own personal story. I'm talking about how I decided for myself that I'm not going to take all these psychiatric drugs anymore. I'm not going to identify as mentally ill. I'm going to take my life back. People hear me share just my story, and they say, you're anti-medication, you're a pill shamer, you're this, you're that. And I
pill
think
shamer, is that like
pill
slut
shamer?
shaming?
Oh, that's a whole thing.
Okay.
And when I think about this phenomenon a lot. I'm like, what's at the heart of this? Why is this how people are hearing my story? And I think a lot of it is that, Alex, to your point, like the rise of the medical industry, the allopathic medical industry, has so effectively, and in partnership with, all of its family, managed care, hospital industry,
corporate media.
It's a massive conglomerate here, has so effectively conflated care and help and love with treatment, with pharmaceutical products, with clinical interventions, that you can't, if you question a pharmaceutical product like an SSRI, taken it for 20 years, really? Is it necessary?
Because we do need insulin. Like, we need some medicine, right?
Yeah, and you're questioning the fact that people suffer and struggle and need help. Like, people can't separate them out. Like, I can.
They do that to intimidate people. They say, if you bring up problems with the COVID vaccine, if you bring up problems with psychiatric drugs, you're irresponsible and you're scaring people away from life-saving medication.
Wait, I'm dangerous. Washington Post called me dangerous.
And they think, and they position it as if they're doing it out of a place of compassion, because they know it resonates with their base, and they know that this is going to whip people up and get them excited. But honestly, it's actually the least compassionate thing that you could be doing, because we need to have honest conversations about the limits of whether it's the vaccines or the medications. But the pharmaceutical industry, they love it. They love that anytime someone criticizes their product, they're cast as being, stigmatizing against the people who have the mental illness or or the people who have weakened immune systems and things like that.
In the 80s, it was the ethos was you take the drug to no longer need it. It would be like you'd have maybe Zoloft in the 90s or something, so that you'd figure it out and then you could get rid of it. That was the point. And then at some point between like 1995 and 2003 or 4 or 7, it was all of a sudden like people were supposed to be on it for life. I don't know if that's
a narrative we have
shift.
To give medicine its due. I mean, if you're in a car crash or something like that, you want to see a doctor. If you have a bacterial infection, you want to see a doctor. We got really good at this targeted magic bullet style approach, which really does work. But then we shifted into chronic disease. And that's where we've totally fallen apart, whether it's with the obesity problem going on, with the diabetes issues, and also depression and anxiety, which really are the same. We are not fixing the root causes of these issues at all. In fact, we're giving people drugs to kind of mask the symptom.
And we can basically fix a lot of the symptoms of depression with diet and exercise. Like, I mean, I know Tim was kind of trolling you, but you were right about your gut. That's your second brain. So if like you're constantly putting crap in your gut, like your second brain is not going to function as good as your first one. So I think diet and exercise, obviously if your friend dies, you're going to be sad. Diet and exercise doesn't fix that type of depression, but general anxiety, like every time you exercise, you always feel better because the hormonal response is just, positive. So,
well, no, I agree. I agree with Ian on his point about the poison in the food, endocrine disruption, the hormonal dysregulation. I was just saying that there's two things we're dealing with. There are people who are genuinely, their brains don't work. They're raised in a normal way. They believe normal things, but then they're eating garbage foods. So they're manic. Their heart rate is up and down. They're something is wrong with them due to environmental factors, whatever it may be. And then there are people who are programmed improperly. There's two distinct.
Yeah, Libby was
sometimes both.
Libby was saying how she broke out of the liberal that pre-programmed mindset of like, this is how it is. I did that same thing happened to me in like 2005, 6, 7 when I started to learn, get the red pill. And it was hard and painful, and I destroyed a bunch of my friendships because they thought I was crazy, and I almost killed myself in 2011. Like, I was down and broken, and I had to figure out a new reason to live. But so the kids today, if we can just provide a world where they don't have to go through that, like we just show them like this is what's really going on. They don't need to go through that again.
And also just not knowing the details of your story, but that despair you felt as you were waking up from stories that you realized were bullshit, that you didn't then take that despair to a psychiatrist to treat it, that you actually felt it, you went through it, you moved through that dark night of the soul where you realize everything I thought I knew has fallen apart. I think that's the key thing too. And like Alex, you were saying, you lose someone, you're meant to feel grief, you're meant to feel pain. And I think this consumerist culture that we live in, where every problem, every bit of discomfort, every inch of pain, whether it's physical or mental, is a problem to solve, something to treat with a product, service. I think that's really also what we're talking about here, that we've forgotten what it means to be human. To be human is to have dark, twisted thoughts, to struggle, to suffer, to be lonely. And we have really lost touch with this. And I know, speaking for myself, having spent all of these years, my teens and my 20s, so afraid of my pain, so afraid of my shadow side, because like I often say, I would meet the criteria for psych diagnoses, definitely anxiety disorder today. But like, I don't give a shit. It doesn't mean anything to me today. It's just like, so what? They invented a bunch of subjective labels and put them in the book. It has no weight for me. We have to remember what it means to be human. And this is true for this broader polarized moment we're in too, that like we've lost touch with our fundamental nature. Sorry, Libby.
That's also what you were saying, Joseph. You were talking about how essentially we're turning people into lifelong consumers of medical products, right? Because the drugs that you take for these various mental conditions, which can't be found in the brain, right? We don't have any physical reality that says, oh, when we see this, that's depression. When we see this, that's anxiety. It's just sort of self-diagnosed to a certain extent, or diagnosed by a therapist. But
completely subjective. No biological tests.
And once you start taking these drugs, after a while, they no longer provide the, relief that perhaps they were in the first place. And you have to take different ones, and then you have to up your medication dosage.
We have breaking news. This is in the past 20 minutes. Steven Crowder, shout out to the Loudworth Crowder crew and the Mug Club. They have obtained the Utah County Sheriff's Office internal documents regarding suspected Charlie Kirk assassin Tyler Robinson. The information has been made public by the Crowder team. And I'm not so much focused on his personal details, but we have the charges: felony discharge of firearm causing serious bodily injury, obstruction of justice, capital first-degree felony conduct, and aggravated murder, which not bailable. And I believe in the second document just repeats those charges with more information about the individual and the probable cause statement, which is long, but I do want to read. It says, the following information was obtained by your affiant from police officers. Multiple video recordings posted on social media websites, Utah Valley University campus surveillance cameras, and those who witnessed the incident. On September 10th, 2025, Charles James Kirk was at the Utah Valley University campus in Orem, Utah for a political event. Mr. Kirk is a conservative political activist who is scheduled to speak at an event in the courtyard area of the UVU campus. The courtyard area is to the west of the Lossy Center building. According to video recordings, Charles was wearing a white t-shirt and dark pants, sitting under a white canopy in a courtyard of the campus facing to the east. The event was attended by hundreds of individuals. Charles was surrounded by people, with multiple individuals to his left, right, and rear and front of the canopy. Behind the canopy was a walkway used for access to various parts of the university. Charles was holding a microphone and speaking to the crowd. While speaking to the microphone, a loud gunshot was heard at approximately 12:23 hours, and Charles appeared to have been hit in the neck. Blood was seen coming from the left side of his neck as he fell over to his left. Charles was transported to the Timpanogos Regional Hospital in Orem. Charles was pronounced deceased at the hospital. Investigators reviewed the Utah Valley University surveillance cameras. While reviewing the surveillance cameras, investigators observed an individual on the rooftop of the Lossy Center building on the UVU campus at the time of the shooting. Hereafter, the unidentified individual will be referred to as suspect. Based on surveillance camera footage, suspect appears to be a white male with dark-colored hair, wearing a dark-colored hat, sunglasses, a long-sleeve black shirt, with a picture of an American flag and an eagle printed on the shirt, dark-colored jeans, and white and gray shoes with white-colored shoelaces. The shoes appear to be consistent with Chuck Taylor Converse-style shoes. The suspect is also carrying a dark-colored backpack on his back. Suspect walks with a distinctive gait. Prior to the shooting, suspect appears to walk with a stiff right leg and at a relatively slow pace. Suspect's ability to bend his right leg appears to be restricted. Investigators were able to track suspect's movements on the UVU campus starting at approximately 11:50 hours on 9/10/2025. At approximately 11:50 hours, a UVU surveillance camera first captured suspect walking across a grassy area north of Campus Drive at approximately 800 West. Suspect walked south through the parking lot and approached a pedestrian tunnel that runs underneath Campus Drive. Before entering the tunnel, suspect paused at the top of the stairs and pulled out what appeared to be a cell phone from his right pocket, using his right hand at approximately 11:53 hours. Suspect eventually puts what appears to be a cell phone back in his right pants pocket, using his right hand. Surveillance captured suspect making his way towards the Losi Center. At approximately 12:02 hours, suspect was recorded walking on the north side of the Losi Center building, walking with the same gait as observed earlier. Suspect entered the Losi Center building through a set of doors on the southeast corner of the Losi Center building at approximately 12:15 hours. Suspect was observed walking up the stairs that lead to the common area adjacent to the Losi Center building. Suspect walked to a short concrete wall that separates the common area from the rooftop of the Losi Center building at approximately 12:17 hours. Suspect climbed over the short wall and appeared to crouch down on the north side of the wall on the rooftop. At approximately 12:22 hours, suspect stood up and started running across the rooftop of the Losi Center building. The notable limp from his previous surveillance was absent. The suspect ran to the west side of the rooftop and appeared to scoot along the rooftop area as he got closer to the edge of the rooftop. At approximately 12:22 hours, suspect laid down in a position consistent with a prone shooting position near the edge of the rooftop and appeared to be facing west in the direction of the courtyard area. The rooftop of the Losi Center building overlooks the courtyard area where the event featuring Charlie Kirk was taking place. The Losi Center building is east of the courtyard area. At approximately 12:23 hours, Charlie Kirk was shot. At approximately 12:23 hours, surveillance shows the suspect stood up and suddenly from the edge of the rooftop and sprinted north on the rooftop of the Losi Center building. Suspect ran to the northeast corner of the Losi Center building and approached the edge of the rooftop. Suspect placed a dark-colored item on the rooftop and proceeded to lower himself off the rooftop. Suspect dropped off the rooftop onto the grass below. Suspect ran north near the parking lot to the east of the Losi Center. At approximately 12:24 hours, suspect ran north across the Campus Drive Road. Suspect appeared to be carrying an item whose identity is not clear from the surveillance. The area to the north of the Campus Drive Road where the suspect crossed over consists with a grassy area with trees on the edges of the UVU campus. Investigators discovered a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a dark-colored towel. The rifle was determined to be a Mauser Model 98 30-06 caliber bolt-action rifle. The rifle had a scope mounted on top of it. Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices bulge, OWO, what's this?" Inscription on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, catch," up arrow symbol, a right arrow symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow, Chow." A third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." Investigators also discovered a shoe impression on the northeast corner rooftop edges of the Losi Center building. This shoe impression was located in the vicinity where the suspect climbed down from the rooftop. The shoe impression is consistent with the shoe sole characteristics of a Converse Chuck Taylor shoe. On the evening of September 11th, 2025, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at UVU. This information was also conveyed to the FBI. Investigators reviewed additional video footage from the UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in plain maroon t-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes. When encountered in person by investigators in Washington County on September 12th, early morning hours, Robinson was observed in consistent clothing with the surveillance images. Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, 2025. And in conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate. The family member also confirmed Robinson had a gray Dodge Challenger. Investigators identified an individual as the roommate of Robinson. Investigators interviewed the roommate, who stated that his roommate, referring to Robinson, made a joke on Discord. Investigators asked if he would show them the messages on Discord. He opened it and showed several messages to investigators and allowed investigators to take photos of the screen as each message was shown by Robinson's roommate. These photos consisted of various messages, including content of messages between the phone contact named Tyler with an emoji icon and Robinson's roommate's device. The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where the rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from the contact Tyler also mentioned that he had changed outfits. Based on the evidence detailed in this statement, I believe there's probable cause that Tyler Robinson committed the crimes of aggravated murder by shooting Charlie Kirk in a circumstance that put many around him at grave risk of death, felony discharge of a firearm, and obstruction of justice for moving and hiding the rifle believed to be used in the shooting. By submitting this affidavit, I declare under criminal penalty of the state of Utah that the foregoing is true and correct. Signed, Davis Bryan. Once again, shout out to Steven Crowder and his team for
they're good at
breaking this news
stuff,
and sharing this. There are some people who are concerned about this stuff getting released, but I think it is clear based on the evidence that they have and what we've seen so far that this is an open and shut case.
So what do you guys think psychologically, as an analyst of sorts, about public execution?
That's a doozy.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Just real quick, if you can think about it for a second.
Yeah.
There are many people on social media right now suggesting that we need a death sentence and for it to be carried out publicly for a variety of reasons. Some say provides relief and comfort to the millions. It can help act as a pressure relief valve, but more importantly, to symbolize deterrence. Psychologically, do you guys think that's true?
Yes, I do think it's true. I think it would massively act as a huge deterrent. Because, I mean, what kind of message does it send if you go lenient on someone who murders, assassinates a key political figure? I mean,
don't most mass shooters shoot themselves?
Yeah.
No, so I'm saying, so I don't know if that would deter somebody, the death penalty, if they're already going to kill themselves.
You know what concerns me is the internet video, because in the past they would do it. Everyone would go to the public square and they'd watch it and then they'd leave and they'd be like, I'm never messing with that. But now with the ever-present repetition of it on TV, I think it would make the guy a hero and just also desensitize.
Like the Luigi situation, who, you know, he's now kind of, you know, valorized in a way.
They made him a hero.
Yeah.
They made Saint Luigi candles.
Yeah.
And I assure you, with the information being released on this man, I wouldn't be surprised if literally already they're selling merch, hailing him as a hero. He'll be on the cover of their zines or whatever they have to do. I bet if you go on Blue Sky, they're all lionizing him.
Because I was for public execution, just like scare them into stopping. But now with internet video, I'm super concerned about the ramifications for 1,000 years if that was a video that burned into every child's memory.
The problem with this, though, is he's going to probably plead guilty, and so he'll be, you know, probably spared from the death penalty.
Well, if you look at Ryan Routh, he's already attempting to make the trial of his assassination attempt on Trump as a political statement. He's trying to bring into this court case things Trump has said or done to use them as justification of something, you know, related to his case. So I'd imagine this person will do the exact same thing. I often say you have to give people a path to redemption, otherwise they'll take the other path. Right now, clearly, there is no path to redemption for what this man has done. He will look at the roads before him. One is blocked off for very obvious reasons. There will be no forgiveness here. But the left, they've left the road open as they celebrate for him. There's a clear and obvious path he will walk down as we go to trial.
Maybe life in prison. The guy that shot John Lennon, he's still, his 17th parole was denied, I think. He's still rotting in prison. Hinckley, John Hinckley, and he wanted to be known as like he wanted to be connected to Lenin. That was part of what he said why he did.
But that was Chapman.
I'm sorry, I said Hinckley. Hinckley shot Reagan.
Hinckley got out.
Hinckley's out. Sorry about that, dude.
And Chapman was crazy.
So sorry about that.
And Hinckley was crazy.
Mark David Chapman, that's the guy.
He was nuts.
17 paroles denied.
It wasn't politically motivated that he shot John.
No, he wanted to be associated with John Lennon. It was that sick fan, and that's what he said anyway. And I don't know if killing him would have done anything. This guy, maybe it's better that he rots in prison for 20 years and then he repents.
This is a serious issue. I mean, with the school shooters, I mean, we've been looking at this for years now. Like, how do you actually deter this type of thing? And it's only gotten worse. I mean, there's more and more of them.
I was thinking about that the other day too, because we used to do this thing where we'd say, "Don't publicize the name of the shooter," but that didn't do anything at all except for make people curious. It was like the Streisand effect.
I still think it's good practice.
Yeah, but now everybody's names are publicized. You know everybody's names.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say we're in uncharted to get back to this deeper point that we're living. The world that we live in is we are not designed to thrive in a digitized reality. Like evolutionarily, we have not adapted yet. It's happened so fast. Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying talk about this concept of hyper novelty, that we industrialization has so rapidly spread progress, so to speak, and we haven't evolved to meet it. And so this question of what do we do, public execution or not, and I feel like I can't speak to it because I just have to, it's such a big question. I'd have to sit with it for weeks. But we're in uncharted territory here. Like when we're talking about, do we put the name on the internet or not? And, a video that will be available for eternity of someone dying or not, like we're not designed for this, like as human beings. And I think that's I just keep coming back to that. We are in uncharted territory here.
I think a lot about the power of words and how with the internet video age, they become so much more powerful. They've always been powerful. They say spells, you spell your word. It's casting a spell on nature and people and things. And orators would command thousands of people. Now
Hollywood that's made from the wood of the holly tree, and that's what witches use to cast spells. That's why it's called Hollywood.
Interesting.
What?
So
yes, look it up. Why it's called Hollywood, because it's made with a witch's wand. It's made from the holly tree. That's why Hollywood is called Hollywood.
What I'm doing is I'm always kind of bridging the line between manifesting a positive future, because it does have implications on what people hear and believe and think is going to happen, and also just saying what's really happening, which can be very dark. Or what? Not that it's happening. This is a word thing I had to twist through my brain. It happened. That happened. These things happened. They're not happening right now. They happened. What's happening right now is this. It's important. It's these little things in the twist of nature, in verbology, or just linguistics that we need to adapt along with the technology, I think.
Harry Potter's wand in the story is made of Hollywood. Yeah.
I'm not making that up.
No, yeah, he's correct.
Unicorn heartstring or something, right?
That was
No, but that's why Hollywood is called that, because it was meant to basically cast spells to, make, and that's why every major movie always had some sort of subliminal programming in it. And now I think obviously they still do that, but I don't know if the movies have the same effect as they did back when there was less digital media to compete.
Wood from the holly tree is historic, in European folklore was used for magic spells, wands, and warding off evil spirits and
Hollywood.
That's why it's called, dude. When the people decided to call it Hollywood, that was literally why, because it's not a joke. Walt Disney, all this stuff, they wanted to name it after a spiritual thing, and they chose Hollywood because that's what witches use. They have to use the wood of a holly tree or the wand doesn't work.
I just thought a couple days ago that Top Gun ended the Cold War. Like, obviously Reagan and Gorbachev did it 3 years later, but I think heavily the Russians were inspired by that movie, and they were like, maybe we could be the bad guys. What is going on? That movie is awesome. I kind of want to be American. And like, Tom Cruise is such a hero in so many ways.
And not just that, there's no holly in Los Angeles.
Dude, that's why they called it that. That's not a conspiracy. It's like an open, I'm not like, obviously it sounds conspiratorial, but that's like, that's why they named it.
The principal theory is that they thought shrubs were holly, but that makes no sense.
Yeah, they were occultists, probably.
I don't know if they were occultists.
Or interested in the
These
occult.
are the most creative people in the world. Like, and part of the reason why they went to California is because they can film all year round because of the climate is so
taxes
and the sunlight.
Well, but they can film outdoors. It doesn't get too hot, and there's not a lot of rain, so it's just convenient because a lot of the filming
the tax man couldn't get them.
Well, whatever. I don't even know
That's
how
a
the
big
taxes
reason.
works
they
out.
fled the mafia
But,
on the
but
East
I'm just
Coast.
saying that's the real reason. And you have to remember the people that started Hollywood, they are into occultism and black magic, and that's why every actor said, "Oh, I love Aleister Crowley." So trust me, there's a lot of satanic and occultic programming within all of Hollywood's development.
Occult just means to see beyond.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's
what's
necessarily
unseen.
nefarious.
Like ocular,
Yeah.
oc is to see, and occult is beyond, or what lies beyond. So it's neutral. It's
There's
not
a lot of people that can
religion
decode
is
this.
occult.
Mark Dice is good at decoding it. There's a lot of people that do this, but Hollywood, I'm telling you, there's so much weird hidden programming and symbolism in Hollywood.
They say there's no evidence that's why they named it that, but there also is no story as to why they named it Hollywood.
So the spell casting amplification power is now decentralized, and all these humans that some of them have no idea what they're doing have the power of amplification of words, of spells, and I think that's the term manifestation was super popular in 2007, with the what the bleep do we know? And they're like, you're creating reality with your words. It's not quite that simple. You're affecting reality with your words. You're changing the shape of things with the sound, literally cymatic, all sorts of cymatic inversions or whatever you want to call. And it's like, how do we do it? How do we do it ethically? I think this show is a good example. Shows like just talking about it, it's like meta, we're talking about things.
Wow. People are now digging through the social media of the family of the shooter. And it's actually pretty scary that some of the stuff that's being posted shows what we are concerned about. Disaffected young men, listless with no purpose. Rudyard Lynch had warned about this, that a society with many young men, young adults who don't have families, see conflict. People with children tend not to want to fight because they have children. People without children have nothing. And the posts are starting to paint a picture of a young man who apparently had nothing. He was, incel is not the right word, but that's the word people typically use to describe perhaps hikikomori is the better word. It's a little hard to understand. Japanese term for young men who lock themselves in their room and play video games all day.
Okay.
Neat, but I don't know that it was actually a neat, but there's this phenomenon of young men living at home with limited prospects, no purpose, who get radicalized.
I mean, this was his ticket to glory, it sounds like, thinking, I've got nothing else going on. Maybe if I do this one great thing, I'll be remembered.
And this is what I have been warning about as of recent, which I will try to keep light because I don't want to discuss too publicly. But I have made several predictions on my morning show on IRL. Less so on the culture. We're supposed to be having just straight up conversation about various topics, but it's a news day. But what I've been warning of right now is, and I'm saying this because I've predicted a lot of things over the past several years and have been in the correct area. And I don't mean to sound arrogant or anything, but I think it's important that I at least preface this by saying one of the most notable predictions I had was the essence of January 6th. And for that prediction, I was accused of having foreknowledge. In September of 2020, I stated on, I think, my morning show on IRL, if Trump loses in November, his supporters are going to go to D.C. and they will storm the White House. They're not going to let this stand. That is the anger that we are seeing. Of course, I was not completely correct, but I was in the appropriate region. It was in January, and we saw people storm the Capitol. I don't think it was the worst, the apocalypse as the left tries to describe it, or a 14th Amendment qualifying insurrection, but it was bad. When I had first said it, people said I was nuts and Tim's crazy for bringing it up and these things will never happen. And then after it happened, the left began to share messages saying Tim Pool had foreknowledge and should be arrested and subpoenaed and brought before Congress, simply because as reading the news and looking at what was going on, I said, I think this will happen. We now have, as we predicted last year, the National Guard being sent in to assist with immigration enforcement, challenges from the Democrat state with the federal government over who controls the National Guard, as we predicted on the show during the election. And, of course, the escalation now. The left would not let that stand. Protests escalating to assassinations. And another prediction that was made, Rudyard Lynch had pointed this out, for which we had made similar statements and agreed. Young men with nothing going for them, with nothing to lose, will engage in these extreme acts, which is what it appears we are seeing now with the death of Charlie Kirk. And my fear now, as I have privately made more serious predictions, but I will keep, for a variety of reasons I don't want to say too much on, my fear is There are an equal amount of young men. I don't mean literally equal, but there is a large amount of young men, both left and right, who are in this category, who feel they have nothing left to lose. Yeah. And my fear right now is that there is a young man who has spent the past few years watching Charlie Kirk videos, who was inspired by Charlie, for good reason to be, who has turned his life around for the better. He's perhaps begun working out. He's perhaps taken up a new job. There was a viral post where a mother was saying, "This is my son. He watches Charlie's content, and he is a hard worker. He's learning a trade. He works 12 hours a day. He says he wants to be like Charlie." And for some of these young men who felt like Charlie was a voice that could lift them out, they feel like this was taken from them, and that was their guiding force. For a young man like the guy who killed Charlie, but on the other side of the spectrum, politically, who now feels that they were wronged to an extreme degree, my fear is a person like this will not be able to tolerate watching an endless stream of videos on social media mocking the death of Charlie, selling merch, mocking the death of Charlie, saying debate this, celebrating it, cheering for it. And a person with nothing going for them will escalate. And that's my concern right now. So I hope this does not happen. As Trump even stated, we will win electorally. Don't let them take away what we are winning from.
Yeah, don't let them poison your mind with TV. Like, follow Charlie's method if you believe in Charlie. Like Saturday Shabbat, get off the TV, turn the cameras down. Be like him. Like, the difference is the kids that worship or that followed Charlie and that believed in Charlie, they had a mentor that will be with them for the rest of their life. Whereas the kids that are on psychiatrics and have a broken home, that do these crazy violent acts, they don't. But you'll always remember Charlie. He's always with you. So
he wouldn't have wanted it.
And I mean, I think we all need to widely condemn it if it does happen, because he wouldn't have wanted it, and
right.
We're better than that. And he would have wanted, due process through the police, with open conversation and all of that, and that's what we need to stick to.
And
No, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, I really appreciate you saying this to him, and because I do think it's deeper than left or right. It's a fundamental crisis here, and it makes me think about how many of those lost young men manage to find their ways into psychiatrist offices or therapist offices, where they're then told, "Oh, you're sick. This isn't your fault. Chemical imbalance. Here are pills." And I think what I'm sitting with hearing you talk is just how, like, if you're listening to this and you know someone in your life who is lost, especially if it's a young man, to connect, like reach out, connect. And you don't need to send them to a professional necessarily. Like, sometimes what we're hungering for, especially as a formerly lost girl, is connection with another human being who has been through their own struggle too. I didn't need to be kind of disappeared off into a long series of professionals' offices. Like, I needed to talk to my fellow humans about how confused I was about the point to being alive. And I think, like, it's a call, an invitation to all of us to pay attention to the people in our lives who are lost and connect with them.
So we are just about out of time for this show, but we will be tracking the news. Much more is coming out about the suspect, about his family, about his potential motivation. So we'll be tracking that all day. We're back tonight at 8 p.m. for Timcast IRL. I don't know if everybody just wants to say some final words.
I want to say one thing. Obviously Charlie spoke, passionately against victimhood and being a victim. And on September 10th, Charlie was the biggest victim, but we were all victims, and the world is a much worse place today without Charlie than it was with him. So it's okay to process that, and it's okay to feel sad right now. And obviously that doesn't mean we need to quit, but we all are victims, even the people that didn't like Charlie, because the world is so much significantly worse today.
Anybody wanted to?
Yes, I'm Libby Emmons, and I just wanted to, I thank you guys for this conversation today. I really appreciate it. I think it's very necessary to talk about these things. And I just want to say that in light of this week, be courageous, stand up, don't cower before people who are louder than you. Just stand your ground and hold your values and stand on the word.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Charlie's death will stay with me for the rest of my life, and the only thing it's done it made me more willing to stand up and have difficult conversations and get out there in people's faces and talk about this. And I will never stop. Yeah.
Where can people find you guys?
Yeah, so the Dr. Josef YouTube channel, that's Josef. If you just search Dr. Josef, we're on all social media sites. And if you are someone who's having a hard time with psychiatric medications and you want expert help coming off, our website is the Taper Clinic, and we're in the 14 most populous states in the U.S. And if you're not in the U.S. and you're tuning in abroad or in a different one of those states, you can go to the Contact Us section on my website, and I have directories for providers all over the world who do psychiatric deprescribing, and they will be able to help you get off if you want to find another way.
It's an honor to be here, and you can find me at lauradelano.com. You can find the organization I founded to help people who, like Josef, are maybe thinking about coming off psychiatric medications. We have a step-by-step self-directed tapering manual. You can learn about how people come off safely. You can connect with other people who are leaving behind diagnoses and meds. That's Inner Compass Initiative, and it's theinnercompass.org. And my book is Unshrunk, A Story of Psychiatric Treatment Resistance.
Buy Unshrunk. I want to hold it. Can I hold that?
Please.
Buy this book. If you believe in the methodology, get it. Unshrunk.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks for coming.
It's an honor to be here.
I made a video about Charlie yesterday, just talking about him because he was a kind of like a brother. But anyway, I made a video about it. It's on YouTube and X. I put it on Facebook too, but it's on YouTube on my YouTube channel. And I'm going to be on Pop Culture Crisis today at 3 p.m. So tune into Pop Culture Crisis on YouTube, and I'll see you there. You want to? No. Alex Stein's an amazing human being.
Stein.
Yeah. Thanks for
Just
coming, man.
mention where they can find you, Libby.
Oh, you can find me on Twitter at Libby Emmons and at thepostmillennial.com and humanevents.com.
You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. We're back at 8 p.m., as I mentioned, with many more updates. If anything big happens today, we'll, of course, jump on and go live. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.